Hello viewers, this is Nimura TV and you're watching Perspectives with me, MARYAM Olubode. A political storm is brewing in Nigeria. The suspension of Rivers State Governor Siminalayi Fubara has triggered a fierce debate over constitutional authority and federal overreach. The presidency insists this is not a power grab, but the fact tells a different story. A political storm is brewing in Nigeria. The suspension of Rivers State Governor Siminalayi Fubara triggered a fierce debate over constitutional authority and federal overreach. The presidency insists this is not a power grab, but the facts tell a different story. The latest diplomatic flashpoint between the United States and South Africa is playing out like a political thriller. At the center of it all is Ibrahim Rasool, South Africa's now expelled ambassador to the US, who returned home over the weekend to a hero's welcome. His message: he is not backing down. Rasool, who was expelled by Washington after making controversial remarks about US President Donald Trump, has made it clear he will not be silenced. In a defiant homecoming speech at Cape Town International Airport, Rasool told supporters, "A declaration of persona non grata is meant to humiliate you, but when I return to a crowd like this and with warmth, then I will wear my persona non grata as a badge of dignity. This is not about just one man. It is about a growing rift between South Africa and the United States, one that is exposing the deep divisions in global politics." The world's most notorious mega prison is back in the headlines. El Salvador's government now says families of detainees can file complaints if they believe their loved ones have been unjustly imprisoned. That sounds like progress, right? Well, not so fast. This is the same prison where thousands of alleged gang members and even some who just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time are locked up, often without trial. The facility, officially called CHCOT, has become a symbol of President Nayib Buke's iron-fisted crackdown on crime. But behind the tough on crime image lies a darker story, one of human rights violation, mass detention, and an opaque legal system that leaves families helpless. Now, for the first time, the government is offering a legal venue for families to contest these detentions. But does this mean justice is coming? Or is this just another layer of bureaucracy in an already broken system? All of those are coming, but first the news headline. Nigeria's presidency denies power grab. South Africa's ambassador returns, calls US sanctions a badge of dignity. Gaza death toll passes 50,000. El Salvador's mega prison, families can now challenge unjust detentions. Germany's military awakening, billions unlocked as Europe faces a new era of uncertainty. Food banks in crisis as USDA halts $500 million in deliveries. Now to the news and details. Nigeria's presidency denies power grab as Governor Fubara defies suspension, appears in public. Last Monday, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu invoked emergency powers, suspending Governor Fubara, his deputy, and the State House of Assembly. The official reason? To restore order in Rivers State. The oil region has been grappling with political infighting, violent clashes, and allegations of sabotage against national economic interest. The presidency argues that without firm intervention, the situation could spiral out of control. But critics are unbiased. The Nigerian Bar Association (NBA), opposition figures, and legal experts are calling the move unconstitutional. The NBA's president, Mercy Osigwe SAN, did not mince words. There is no provision in the Nigerian constitution that allows the president to suspend a sitting governor. This is an abuse of power, he declared. Former Rivers State Governor and ex-Minister of Transportation Chiweke Rotimi went further, calling the suspension a direct assault on democracy. According to him, this illegal action cannot stand. He urged Nigerians to resist what he labeled as an executive coup. The presidency is on damage control, insisting that this is not about consolidating power. Presidential spokesperson Bayo Onanuga released a statement claiming that the decision was made in the best interest of the people of Rivers State. The government argues that political instability in the state has led to economic sabotage, particularly in the oil sector. The federal government has a responsibility to ensure stability in strategic states, Onanuga stated. This is not about power, but about peace. But here is the problem. Section 305 of Nigeria's 1999 Constitution allows the president to declare a state of emergency, but does not grant the power to unilaterally remove an elected government. That authority belongs to the judiciary and, in some cases, the state legislature. Lagos Pact Koliedin weighed in, stating, "This is a dangerous precedent. If allowed to stand, what stops the president from suspending any governor in the future under the guise of emergency intervention?" Despite his so-called suspension, Governor Fubara was seen in the public addressing supporters in Port Harcourt. His appearance sent a clear message. He does not recognize the suspension. The governor, flanked by key aides, urged calm but emphasized that democracy must be protected. Power belongs to the people. We were elected to serve, and no unconstitutional action can change that, he told an energetic crowd. His defiance raises a critical question. Can the federal government enforce a suspension without risking a constitutional crisis? This is a high-stakes battle. The National Assembly has been silent, but pressure is mounting. If the legislature supports Tinubu's move, it could embolden the presidency. If they push back, it could trigger a legal battle that goes all the way to the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, opposition parties, civil society groups, and legal scholars are mobilizing. Protests already being planned in Rivers State and calls for judicial intervention are growing louder. Nigeria's democracy is at a crossroads. Is this a necessary intervention to maintain stability, or is it a dangerous overreach that threatens the country's democratic foundations? One thing is clear, this crisis is far from over. Moving on, expelled and unapologetic, South Africa's ambassador returns, calls US sanctions a badge of dignity. The diplomatic storm began when Washington declared Rasul persona non grata, essentially kicking him out of the country. The US State Department claimed that Rasul's comments about Trump and American racial politics were unacceptable. During a recent webinar, Rasul argued that Trump's Make America Great Again movement was a reaction to shifting racial demographics in the US. This did not sit well with Trump's Republican administration, which called the remarks race-baiting and divisive. Within days, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that Rasul had to leave the country immediately. The move sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles. South Africa reacted with outrage, calling the US decision an act of imperial arrogance. The African National Congress, ANC, labeled it a direct attack on South Africa's sovereignty. For South Africa, Brazil's expulsion is not just about one ambassador. It is about a pattern of growing tensions with the United States. South Africa, which has positioned itself as a leading voice for the global South, is increasingly at odds with Washington's foreign policy. The two nations have clashed on multiple fronts. South Africa's case against Israel at the ICJ has angered Washington, which sees it as a direct challenge to US allies. South Africa's close ties with Russia and China have led to growing skepticism in Washington. The US has criticized South Africa's economic policies, claiming they're scaring away American investors. With Russia's expulsion, it is clear that Washington is sending a message. If South Africa wants to be seen as an ally, it needs to rethink its foreign policy. Back in Cape Town, Russia's return felt more like a political rally than a quiet homecoming. Hundreds of supporters, including top ANC officials, gathered at the airport to cheer his arrival. Holding banners that read "Hands of Brazil" and "Down with US imperialism," supporters sang struggle songs as Brazil addressed the crowd. The speech was nothing short of defiant. The United States believes that by declaring me persona non grata, they can intimidate us, but they underestimate South Africa. We have fought against colonialism, against apartheid, and now we stand against any power that seeks to control us. The message was clear. South Africa will not be bullied by the United States. But not everyone is convinced that this is the right approach. South African opposition leaders warn that Pretoria's growing diplomatic hostility towards Washington could have serious consequences. Economic experts say that US-South Africa trade relations could suffer, potentially costing thousands of jobs. We cannot afford to pick a fight with the world's biggest economy, said a leading South African business analyst. South Africa exports billions in goods to the US every year. If relations deteriorate, the economic consequences could be devastating. The expulsion of Ibrahim Rousseau is just the latest flashpoint in a growing diplomatic crisis. South Africa now faces a critical decision. Does it escalate the standoff, or does it try to repair relations with Washington? On one hand, Pretoria is standing firm on its foreign policy. It refuses to abandon its case against Israel, and it continues to build closer ties with China and Russia. On the other hand, US sanctions and economic pressure are real threats. There are already whispers that Washington could consider further sanctions, not just against individuals, but against South African businesses and government agencies. For now, Pretoria remains defiant. Officials insist they will not bow to US pressure. But behind closed doors, there are undoubtedly serious discussions about what happens next. This is bigger than just one ambassador. This is about global power, influence, and control. The US is making it clear that countries who challenge its foreign policy will face consequences. South Africa, meanwhile, is positioning itself as a champion of the global South, determined to resist American dominance. But in this high-stakes diplomatic showdown, one question remains: who will blink first? For now, South Africa is standing its ground, but in a world where economics and politics are deeply intertwined, can Pretoria afford to keep defying the world's biggest superpower? Only time will tell. Moving on, Gaza death toll passes 50,000. The numbers are staggering. More than 50,000 people have been killed in Gaza since Israel launched its military offensive. That's according to the Hamas-run Health Ministry. The sheer scale of death and destruction is unprecedented. The war is relentless. The world is watching, but no one is stopping it. It started on October 7, 2023. Hamas fighters stormed into Israel, killing 1,200 people and taking over 200 hostages. Israel's response was swift and brutal. Bombing campaigns, ground operations, and an all-out siege.
The Israeli military has taken control of part of southern Gaza in the city of Rafah, saying its troops killed a number of Hamas fighters and damaged the group's infrastructure. It's issued new orders for people in the parts of the south to leave, saying the area is now a dangerous combat zone.
Gaza has been turned into a war zone unlike anything seen before. Now, after months of continuous airstrikes, artillery shelling, and urban warfare, more than 50,000 Palestinians are dead. That's more than the entire population of some small countries. Hospitals have collapsed. Food supplies are nearly gone. Gaza is a graveyard and it is still being bombed. Israel insists that this war is about one thing, destroying Hamas. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly said there will be no ceasefire until Hamas is eliminated. Israeli forces have pushed deep into Gaza, targeting tunnels, weapon depot, and Hamas leaders. But the civilian cost unbearable. Residential buildings, schools, hospitals, and even UN shelters have been hit. Israel says Hamas uses civilians as human shields. Critics say Israel's bombardment has been indiscriminate. Either way, the death toll keeps rising. Gaza's streets are unrecognizable. Once bustling neighborhoods are now rubble. The smell of death lingers in the air. Bodies lie under collapsed buildings, some never to be recovered. Survivors have nowhere to go. The borders are closed, and humanitarian aid is barely trickling in. The situation beyond catastrophic. Hospitals are operating without medicine, without power, without enough doctors. Surgeries are being performed without anesthesia. Children with amputated limbs are left untreated. And there is starvation. Gaza is on the brink of famine. Israel's blockade has restricted food and water supplies, leading to mass hunger. Some families have resorted to eating animal feed. So what's next? There is no clear end in sight. Netanyahu says Israel will not stop until Hamas is gone. Meanwhile, Hamas is not ready to surrender. Moving on, Osabato's mega prisons. Families can now challenge unjust detentions, but will it change anything?
Telemundo cameras are given rare access to Latin America's largest prison. Inside this mega prison, you'll find some of El Salvador's most dangerous gang members packed into massive cells, towers of bunk beds, and what looks like bird cages. It's a source of pride for President Nayib Bukele that almost 2 years ago declared a war on crime. A detention center the size of 7 football stadiums with capacity to hold 40,000 prisoners, the largest of its kind in Latin America. Known as the Center for Terrorism Confinement, it opened its doors in 2023 after the government declared a state of emergency.
Let's talk about this prison tech. CCOT is the largest mega prison in the Americas, a fortress of concrete and steel designed to house 40,000 inmates. It was built to solve El Salvador's gang problem once and for all, but the reality inside is grim. Human rights groups call it a black hole for due process. Overcrowding? Check. No legal representation? Check. No contact with the outside world? Check. Detainees are crammed into cells with no windows, no beds, and little access to food or medical care. Some have reportedly died due to mistreatment and lack of medical attention. Families don't even know if their relatives are alive or dead. And now, after months of international pressure, the government is finally saying, fine, if you think your loved one was unjustly arrested, you can file a complaint. But how exactly does this work? Families can now submit petitions for review. Officials claim this request will be processed case by case to determine if a prisoner has been wrongfully detained. But here is the catch. There is no guarantee that anything will actually happen. For one, the Salvadoran government has not explained how these petitions will be handled. Who reviews them? How long will it take? Will there be a transparent process? None of these questions have been answered. Secondly, let's not forget that many of the detainees were arrested without formal charges. Whether because emergency powers, authorities don't even need hard evidence to throw someone behind bars. So what happens when a family files a complaint? But the government suddenly admits it made a mistake. Highly unlikely. This so-called legal avenue for complaints isn't just about justice. It's about optics. El Salvador has been facing mounting international criticism over mass incarcerations, particularly from human rights organizations. The US recently deported over 200 Venezuelan migrants to El Salvador, alleging that they were gang members. CHOT without trial, without legal representation, and without any way to contest their detainment. The backlash has been fierce, firstly because governments will at least appear to be addressing human rights concerns. But will this new process actually free innocent detainees? Or is it just a smoke screen to ease international pressure? Imagine your son, husband, or brothers get arrested in a mass police raid. You have no idea where he is. You don't get a phone call. You don't get to visit. Then weeks later, hear that is inside CCOT, the prison where human rights don't exist. Now, the government says you can file a complaint, but how? Who do you turn to? Lawyers are too afraid to take up these cases. Human rights organizations are overwhelmed. And the authorities, they don't have answer to everyone. Many families fear retaliation. What if filing a complaint actually makes things worse? What if the government brands them as gang sympathizers? Some people won't even risk it. Because government is selling this as a major reform, a sign that El Salvador is addressing concerns about wrongful imprisonment, but without transparency, without independent oversight, and without clear legal mechanisms. This is just window dressing. The real question remains, is justice even possible inside CCOT, or is this just another chapter in El Salvador's war on crime, where guilt is assumed, trials are optional, and human rights are an afterthought? For now, families are left hoping that someone somewhere is actually listening. Germany's military awakening, billions unlocked as Europe faces a new era of uncertainty. Germany is rearming at an unprecedented scale. For decades, Berlin played the role of Europe's economic giant, but military lightweight, spending less on defense, relying on NATO and keeping its army underfunded. The world called it a reluctant power, but that era is over. Germany is now unlocking hundreds of billions of euros to supercharge its military, modernize its infrastructure, and position itself as Europe's new defense leader. This is a Zeitenwende, historic turning point. Chancellor Olaf Scholz said it himself, and the timing is no coincidence. With Russia expanding its war machine, the US shifting focus, and Europe on edge, Germany is making it clear. It will no longer sit back and watch. So, what's behind this seismic shift? Where's the money going, and what does it mean for Europe? Let's break it down. Germany is about to reshape European security. The Bundestag has approved a 100 billion euro military boost, a sum unheard of in modern German history. This is on top of its already growing defense budget. Germany is now officially the biggest military spender in Europe. So where is all of this money going?
The document now needs approval from the Bundesrat, the upper house of the German parliament, with voting scheduled for March 21st. Bloomberg reports that the chances of approval are high. Previously, Friedrich Merz stated that Germany would make a significant contribution to ensuring Ukraine's security. Berlin will provide Kyiv with an additional 3 billion euros in 2025. Recently, the German government updated its list of military aid to Ukraine, which will include, among other things, Gepard anti-craft systems, Iris-T missiles, and ammunition.
More than 100 F-35 fighter jets, still aircraft that can carry nuclear weapons, replacing Germany's aging fleet. Upgraded Leopard 2 tanks to reinforce land defense and counter Russian aggression. New warships and submarines to protect power across European waters. More air defense systems, including Israel-made Arrow 3 interceptors designed to stop incoming missiles. Also stockpiling ammunition after years of shortages exposed Germany's military weaknesses. Oh yes, critics accused Germany of hollowing out its armed forces. They called the Bundeswehr barely functioning, lacking enough working tanks, fighter jets, and even basic ammunition. That criticism is now history. Germany is not just catching up, it is leading the charge. This military transformation is not happening in a vacuum. The world is changing fast, and Germany's old strategy of military restraint no longer works. First, the Ukraine war changed everything. Russia's invasion of Ukraine shattered Europe's illusions about peace. Before the war, Germany had deep economic ties with Russia. It bought Russian gas, built pipelines, and believed diplomacy could prevent war. That belief is gone. Germany now sees Russia as an existential threat, and it's preparing for the worst. No more illusions, no more half measures. Second, the US is no longer Europe's security blanket. For decades, Europe relied on the American military for protection, but the US is now pivoting to Asia, focusing on China and the Pacific. Germany knows that Europe must defend itself. If Washington's attention shifts further away, Berlin doesn't want to be left exposed. NATO's future depends on Europe's strength. Germany's rearmament is not just about national defense, it is about NATO's survival. For NATO to remain credible, European powers must step up. The US has been demanding this for years. Berlin is finally answering the call. For decades, Europe's military backbone was France and Britain. Germany was the economic powerhouse, but the defense underachiever. Now, Germany is shifting the balance of power. The military expansion will make Berlin the dominant force in European defense, economically and militarily. That means stronger European security. Berlin's new investment will make NATO's European wing more self-reliant. Second, a shift in leadership. France and Britain will now have to work with a militarily powerful Germany, not just an economically powerful one. Potentially you and me, with Germany leading, the idea of a European defense force separate from NATO could gain momentum, but not everyone is happy. Germany's military revival is not without controversy. Russia is furious. The Kremlin has called Berlin's military expansion a destabilizing provocation. It's said that Germany is preparing for direct conflict. Some Germans are uneasy. Germany has a deep historical trauma linked to militarization. The idea of a strong German army still makes some people nervous. France is worried. Paris has long seen itself as Europe's military leader. Now, it must deal with a Germany that is no longer playing second fiddle. Far left and far right parties are resistant. Some say the money should be spent on healthcare and infrastructure, not war preparations. But despite the opposition, Berlin is moving forward. This is just the beginning. Germany's military transformation will unfold over the next decade. More weapons, bigger budgets, stronger alliances. Berlin is already deepening ties with NATO, the US and European defense companies. It is forming new military partnerships and pushing for greater European defense independence. The message is clear. Germany is no longer just an economic giant. It is a military powerhouse in the making. But the big question remains, will this make Europe safer? Or are we moving closer to a new conflict? For now, one thing is certain. The era of German military restraint is over and the world is watching. Moving on. Food banks in crisis as USDA halts $500 million in deliveries. Imagine this. You walk into a food bank, expecting a bag of groceries to get through the week, but instead, you're greeted with empty shelves and an apologetic volunteer. No food, no supplies, just uncertainty.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture under the Trump administration making yet another cut, impacting food banks across the country.
Today we're talking about CCC program, which has been halted. We have about 400,000 pounds of food that we've already ordered through the federal government that is currently frozen.
11 truckloads of milk, chicken, eggs, and other supplies. Unclear if it will actually be delivered.
This is the reality across the United States today. Food banks, which serves as a last resort for millions of struggling families, are now facing their home crisis. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, has quietly halted food deliveries worth $500 million. Yes, you heard that right. $500 million worth of food aid gone. The USDA says It's due to supply chain issues and procurement delays. But the timing couldn't be worse. Inflation is high, food insecurity is rising, and now a key source of relief is disappearing. So what's really happening? Let's break it down. The USDA operates the Emergency Food Assistance Program, TFAP, a program that provides food to low-income Americans through local food banks. The federal government purchases food from U.S. farmers and distributes it to states, which then supply food banks and pantries. For years, the FAP has been a lifeline for families struggling to put food on the table. But now, USDA officials have announced that food deliveries for the first half of 2025 have been cut, leaving food banks scrambling to find alternative sources. Why? According to USDA, supply chain disruptions and increased costs have slowed down food purchases. The department insists that new contracts are being negotiated and deliveries will resume later this year. But here is the problem. Food banks need help now, not 6 months later, not next year, right now. Across the country, food banks are already struggling. The pandemic-era aid programs that boosted food supplies have expired. SNAP benefits have been reduced. Inflation has made groceries unaffordable. And now, with the USDA stepping back, many food pantries are on the verge of collapse. At the Greater Chicago Food Depository, staff say they've never seen demand this high. We have more people lining up every day, and we simply don't have enough food to go around, says Kate Muir, the organization's executive director. In Texas, the Houston Food Bank says donations have dropped, and federal support was the only thing keeping them afloat. We rely on TIFA for nearly half of our food supply. If that's cut, where do we turn, says a volunteer. Meanwhile, in California, food banks in Los Angeles and San Francisco are warning of a humanitarian crisis if the situation isn't addressed immediately. This is not just about food, says Gabinos Fontento, CEO of Feeding America. This is about survival. Unsurprisingly, the USDA decision has sparked political backlash. Lawmakers from both parties are demanding answers. Democrats are accusing the administration of failing the country's most vulnerable citizens. Senator David Stabenow called the move irresponsible and unacceptable at a time when food insecurity is already at crisis level. Republicans, on the other hand, are slamming the USDA for mismanaging funds and failing to plan ahead. Senator John Boozman of Arkansas says the government has no excuse for allowing food supplies to dry up. They always find money for foreign aid and defense spending. When it comes to feeding hungry Americans, suddenly there is a supply chain issue, he said. Even governors are stepping in. In New York, Governor Kathy Hochul has called for state-level intervention, warning that food banks cannot wait for federal bureaucracy to catch up. But while politicians argue, millions of Americans have left waiting for a solution. The USDA insists that food deliveries will resume in the second half of 2025, but for many food banks, that's too little, too late. Organizations are now turning to private donors, local businesses, and community initiatives to fill the gap. Some states like California and Michigan are considering emergency funding to keep food banks operational. But the bigger question remains, why is the United States, the big country in the world, facing a hunger crisis? A country that spends billions on military aid, foreign assistance, and corporate bailouts somehow cannot guarantee food for its own citizens. The USDA says this is temporary. For the millions of families relying on food banks, hunger isn't temporary, it's an everyday reality. This isn't just a food crisis, it's a moral crisis. How does a nation that wastes millions on tons of food each year allow its own people to go hungry? How does the government justify cutting food aid while prices skyrocket? Americans are waiting for answers. The USDA says be patient, but for millions, patience is running out. Now before I leave, once again, the news headlines. Nigeria's presidency denies power grab. South Africa's ambassador returns calls US sanctions a badge of dignity. Gaza death toll passes 50,000. Asabado mega prison. Families can now challenge unjust detention. Germany's military awakening. Billions unlocked as Euro faces a new era of uncertainty. Food banks in crisis as USDA halts $500 million in deliveries. Thanks for staying tuned once again. I'm MARYAM OLUGBODE.